afternoon. We would like, in this presentation, zoom on the role of the disability coordinator in 2 university colleges in Flanders, in Belgium. We are Debbie van Loo, my colleague there. She represents the App University College, and Carla van Oost, and myself, Hanne Vrijsen. We represent the VIVES University College, and we are all 3, as you can see, policy advisors and disability coordinators in our university college. At the next slide, we give you some facts about our university colleges, and as you can see, they have about the same amount of students, staff, and we are both located on 6 different campuses. At this map, you can see VIVES is located here in the west of Flanders, and the App University College is here located at the north of Flanders. Why are we here? SIHO is the Support Center for Inclusive Higher Education. They asked us to talk about the role of the diversity coordinator within the UDL framework. SIHO gives support to all universities and university colleges in Flanders about the topic of studying with a disability and the implementation of the UDL framework. They started introducing UDL in 2010, and between 2011 and now, they created a website with online modules on UDL. They gave UDL coaching for academic staff, UDL training days, and they give and share good examples about UDL through different channels. That was a start for VIVES and App to implement the UDL framework at our own university colleges, but both institutions have a different approach. In what's next, my colleagues will explain what the approach at their university college is.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm going to tell you the story about how we try to implement UDL in our university college. I just have 10 minutes, so it will be quick. It will be the headlines, but I hope you will get the idea of our process. To give you some context, at the App University College, it's Artesisch Plantijn University College, we just exist since 2013, so we're relatively new, because we're a merge between 2 university colleges in Antwerp. UDL was introduced by SIHO. Earlier, Hanne gave us more information about it. But there's also our democratic system in higher education. In Belgium, there's no entrance nor selection at the entrance of higher education, except some study programs. But most of the time, there isn't. So we have a lot of different people coming in. Also, the different context in Antwerp, it's really metropolitan. A lot of people with different characteristics coming in. So there's an increase, it's an increase of in diversity in incoming student population. That's why at our university we apply UDL as a framework in our policy. Also in our mission and vision, we strive to have a inclusive and powerful learning environment. Okay. Now, the story. In the beginning, in 2013, when we started as a university college, we saw UDL really as one focus, a separate framework we believed in, but it was not so easy to implement it in our practices. It was introduced by me, the disability coordinator, but soon we realized it needs another approach. It doesn't work. It doesn't get stick. Our efforts doesn't pay. So we try another way, and it's like more integrated way. We put UDL in different kinds of the Department of Education and Research. It's like in professionalization of teachers, in student support, in student participation. There's all kinds of levels within the Department of Education. So our future, that's what we're building now. We see UDL is just is a practice, but we need UD. We need to have good buildings, good communication that is accessible. We need other on digital accessibility. So now we are focusing on UD, but we don't forget the other one, the integrated one. We are still going into it. Okay, now just some examples, just an overview of what we did. At the one focus, so in the beginning, we had a presentation of Louis Lord Nelson. Some of you maybe know her. She's also, like Katie Novak, like a key speaker in UDL from USA. We had workshop UDL. It was organized by SIHO, but also we had our own info sessions about UDL for our coordinators, for staff, teaching staff. There were workshops on demand of the bachelor courses, but it didn't stick enough. It didn't get another mindset in our organization. So we tried, I think 2 years later, UDL and tried to implement it in other kind of areas, like in language policy, in student support, in professionalization. It's an example I will give, I will come to in the next slide, and student participation. And there are other areas still going. In the future, we're now working as a special interest group to address whole accessibility, not only UDL, but UD. Voilà. One of our examples is professionalization of teachers. So I will tell you a small story how it grew. In the beginning, when we had the merge, they put all us together in one room. It was really crowded, but actually it was very fruitful because all of the people in our room, they, at the base, we had the same focus, to create a powerful, inclusive learning environment. So we saw that we all have different perspectives on the same thing. So my colleague Anne, it was social constructive and visible learning. She was really expert in that. Another one, my colleague Leen, in content and language integrated learning. Then another colleague who came a little bit later, it was motivational learning, Gert. And then me, I was busy with UDL. So we put our four heads together in the four frameworks, and we say, don't let us tell a story from different perspectives. Let's tell us a story of one big story, why we will implement a good, powerful learning environment. So we created Chameleon. Chameleon, it's a support model we use in our support for teachers practices. And we had 4 pillars, like set the bar high. It was a common ground in all our four frameworks. Create a meaningful context, give appropriate support, and focus on action and interaction. With all that in a wide focus in learning. I'm not going to tell you more about the model because I have 10 minutes. It's too short. But it is a cooperation. It grew organically with 3 units of the 4 in the Department of Education and Research. Okay. So more of the model. The next thing was, let's try it. Let's test the model. How does it work? Because we're still looking the right way to get it implemented in the practice. Okay, that model was the base for a research project within the bachelor course secondary education. It was a research project to innovate their own practices. There was a model, the Chameleon model. It was inspiring and a little bit translated in another teaching concept because of the ownership. It was necessary. They feel that the concept was their own. So they took the model, the support model, and translated in their own practices. Then, on the base of that model and some data, qualitative data, quantitative data of their profiles of students, now they're trying to reflect on their own practices on the base of those frameworks. And the way we do it, it is with teacher design teams. So there are different groups, and everybody has his own course, like biology. And then we focus on what can you do to change and to improve your teaching practice with those models. And that's where we're still now. It's going on now. But it's one of our our practices. Okay, the next step for us is just ongoing integration. Try to involve a lot of people. We start with professional of academic staff, student support, student participation, and policy on diversity. They're all really quite new, but they started. But there's a lot of areas still open, like internationalization, research, and a lot of other areas. So the next years, we will continue with this integration. And the other step, from the perspective of wider UD and the wider accessibility, is a special interest group. We want to involve everybody in our university college. This is only in the planning stage now, so I can't tell you about results or the outcome about it, maybe later, next years. The goal is to create a growth mindset in organization and to get the people of the policy stimulates to accept accessibility in their own area. So, concrete, what are we going to do? We bring actually the students, staff, and all people who work in organization together about certain topics of accessibility, and then match them with people who create the policy. So the input is very direct, and they can do something about it. So we hope that it will stimulate the policy and the students and the teaching staff and all the people who work in our organization to share all the knowledge, experience that there is about accessibility in the whole wide view. Okay, it's really quick. I hope you could understand a little bit about it.
Hello everyone, I'm Carla. I call myself a Udl Ambassador for quite some years now, because I think it's very excited. I'll change to the next one. I think it's very exciting looking for as many possible ways to spread the Udl thought in higher education. And I particularly like conferences like this one, because it's a great opportunity for meeting new people, new approaches, new ideas, new examples. And I'm showing you a couple of quotes and examples I learned about in the conference in 2015. And these one, today, I still use them in my approach in my university college in VIVES to teach about UDL, to spread the word. You also see the golden circle. It's a bit invisible, but the golden circle is up there because once someone told me, if you want to convince people to change, start with the why. That was a very good advice. So I think, well, I hope, I'm sure of it, that returning back home, once again, I will be full of exciting ideas in my head to bring back home with me. Well, I was working as a disability coordinator. That was in a rather small university college. I started to get interested by UDL, read about it, saw some examples, took one of the training sessions from SIHO, and got really excited. I changed some things in our university college, and I made a training session for my colleagues. But I was a disability coordinator, and the focus stayed a lot on how can we improve the learning for students with a disability. Other students too, of course, but the focus was students with a disability. And in 2013, there was a merger between two university colleges, and the other one was actually our biggest competitor until then. So I don't have to tell you, people weren't very excited with that change. There was a lot of discontent and actually some resistance for the change. But then again, that was also a new opportunity. because something new was built. A new university college, VIVES, with a new educational policy, a new vision. And we could build something on that. You see here, those are the keywords of our educational policy: drive, connection, and innovation. And those keywords, well, I saw a lot of UDL opportunities in them. So again, I was really excited to move on with that. And my role changed a bit. Before I was a disability coordinator, now the focus was broader: diversity. Maybe that was because of the big differences between the two university colleges. People tend to see a lot of differences. There were a lot of similarities, but people were afraid that if we would introduce new goals, new visions, they really wanted that it would fit both university colleges equally. So there was a lot of focus on the diversity. But I was glad, because that focus on diversity, that was just what I needed to get on. I had been invited to join a group of people who were setting out the goals for the next 4 years. And voila, just like that, UDL was in our main goals of the university college. Goal number 10. It's very shining. I was very proud of myself. I did it. You see, it's not always that hard to get it in there. I convinced people that it was an important aspect of our education, and they chose UDL as one of our main goals. Unfortunately, that didn't work. My colleagues didn't become more UDL-minded. They didn't implement more of the principles, and after a while, they didn't even want to listen to the UDL story anymore. And thinking back about the slide of Katie Novak, about engagements, well, there was no attention and no commitment at all. So it was shining, but it was nothing more than this title on the slide. People thought that there had been enough change, enough guidelines, enough new things, and maybe even that UDL was something very hip that was going to fade away eventually. And really, I can't blame them, because when you get so much information, so much change, well, who still knows what to do when you get that all at the same time? But I had this workshop where I would introduce UDL principles, and the title of that workshop was "Be stubborn about your goals and flexible about your methods." Very inspirational for myself too. Being stubborn, that wasn't a problem. I excel in that. It's being flexible that I had to think about. And, well, I kind of took a more sneaky approach. I threw out the term universal design, didn't mention it anymore, and I started to talk a lot more with my colleagues. All those different services, domains, are part of our educational departments. All of those colleagues were rewriting visions, resetting goals, new guidelines, new good practices. And I talked to them. And I started to implement the UDL principles in their thinking process, in their writing process. So UDL became a lot more, in all those areas, a lot more important. And as of that moment, it wasn't really something of the disability coordinator or the diversity coordinator, it was our educational policy. At the same time, I found other UDL ambassadors who did the same thing. And for instance, the vision on blended learning was introduced with a lot of more UDL principles, and also the guidelines on how to make written study materials. I kind of snuck in some principles. So just like that, it happened. I wasn't really a diversity coordinator anymore, but part of the educational policy. And people didn't see it anymore as something for student support services of students with disabilities. It's a part of it. Sometimes they don't even know it's a part of it, because it's so well hidden. We don't want to stop here. there are a lot of other areas, other domains, other services that we really want to be more engaged with the UDL principles. We already had some successes, but also a lot of missed opportunities. For instance, there was a new website was launched, but we really couldn't get involved with that. And the online learning departments published some guidelines about how to develop online learning materials, but we only read it when it was already published. Summing up, well, it may be said that one of the success factors of implementing UDL in VIVES was the changing role of the UDL Ambassador. At first, mainly coming from student support services, but the focus stayed with students with a disability. Later on, more the focus of diversity, and that's broadened the view. But the real turning point came when UDL and UDL ambassadors became an aspect of educational development. At this moment, we are trying to take the next step. That is, making UDL matter for all staff and all services, not only teaching staff, and make it happen for and with all of our learners, all of our students. Thank you.
If we reflect very briefly on both approaches, we made the following SWOT analysis, and we can see it as a strength that the focus lies on the diversity of the students. We also succeeded in both university colleges in integrating UDL in the educational policy, and we think this way makes the framework more than a bunch of principles who only exist on paper. If we would have implemented UDL as an isolated framework, we would never get this far. Another weakness is that existing structures aren't that flexible yet. For example, the home style of our university colleges isn't so UDL-minded, but it's not that easy to change this in a short time. We also realize that to maintain this approach, we constantly have to stay up to date with all the educational developments in our institution. If not, we risk to miss the boat, and guidelines or new things are already finished before we can see them and make the UDL principles be part of it. Last but not least, we see it as a great opportunity, we see a great opportunity in the fact that we are getting the whole institution on board with our approach in both university colleges. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions?
Does anyone want to ask a question? Hello, I'm Geraldine O'Neill from the National Forum for Teaching and Learning here in Ireland. I'm just wondering, when you talk about the fact that you didn't use the term universal design for learning, and going to Paddy's talk earlier about using inclusive learning, is there something about the language of it being difficult, or just the language of universal design for learning? Are people struggling with the term?
I think it was just the wrong moment. There were a lot of changes, and for instance, blended learning, other things, and I came with the term universal design. And the perception was already that that was something for students with a disability, another educational approach. And I wanted to leave that. So I didn't really mention that term anymore. Not always. In the mainly, I don't like to say it out loud, but when I'm talking to people, I really put it back on the table again and tell them that it is the universal design of learning, but that it's not printed in big letters. Here is some UDL thoughts, some UDL guidelines.
Can I, I just wanted to relate that about 2.5, 3 years ago, my previous line manager just started saying to me, you know, I think we need to stop talking about inclusive practice now. It's just, I think people are getting a bit bored. with it, and we need to find other ways to introduce it. So, you know, just fit it into other work in sort of similar way that you were talking about, really. So, you know, it's changed again because there's this new impetus, and it's become sexy to talk about it again, and it's important. And so I think, you know, I sometimes think maybe we should change the term to universal design in the UK for a bit, you know, just to shift people's thinking on again. So I think terminology does have an impact sometimes. After a while, it just kind of floats. They get a sense of what it means, and that just floats past them then.
Hello, I'm Monica Svalfors from Stockholm University. I had a question to Paddy. You mentioned at the end something about HEA senior faculty people, maybe, as mentors or something like that. You had a slide.
Ah, yes, okay.
Could you
yes, sorry, yes, I will, certainly. So the Higher Education Academy has this professional standards framework for teachers, and you can go through a course and learn how to be a teacher, or you can say, well, I've been teaching for a certain amount of time, I'm going to demonstrate that against this framework, and you can get fellowship. And if you go beyond that, if you're actually a leader and you kind of influence change in others, and you can evidence that, you can be a senior fellow of the Higher Education Academy. So what we did was to support the projects that people were setting in motion, we asked senior fellows to come and be a supporting person, so that it wasn't us trying to manage every single project, but we would sit above that process and find out through feedback from the senior fellows how the projects were going and what impacts had been made. So we connected the senior fellows in the institution with the people who wanted to develop and change to implement a new inclusive practice in their area. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's part of senior fellowship as well to remain in good standing. So it was in their advantage to do something that had some element of influence of practice. So it was kind of trying to bring two agendas together.